Carol.
Glad you're working out. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt.
Last time I played in Hawaii, I was the oldest person there playing for about 20 years in a row.
Yeah.
I think on the Zoom, Gary, was that Carol I saw in the background?
Yes.
Okay, tell Carol I said hello. Welcome back, everyone. Oh, Lynn waved as well, Gary. So. Welcome back, everyone. So we have a couple things we're gonna do before we introduce our speaker. The first, as I mentioned, we've been mentioning all month, it's Women's History Month, and you all know me, I love politics, history, and trivia. And Michael J. Thorpe is not here, so this will be a fair fight for everyone. So some women's history political trivia, and those on Zoom, feel free to unmute and participate as well. So let's start off with an easy question, okay? We'll work into the more difficult questions. US history, then we'll go abroad for a little bit. So there have been 3 women nominated by a major political party as vice president. You can name all 3. Who knows it? Jane. Geraldine Ferraro. There you go. So Geraldine Ferraro in 1984, Sarah Palin in 2008, and Kamala Harris, our current vice president, in 2020. Now, here's a bonus question that I only found out when Googling to make sure I didn't miss anyone in those other 3. There was a fourth woman who received electoral college votes as vice president. So of course, Ferraro, Palin, and Harris received votes from electoral college, right, as vice president, but there was a fourth woman in US history who has received a vote as vice president.
Shirley
in 1970,
Chisholm.
say it again?
Shirley Chisholm.
Nope, it was not Shirley Chisholm. So to receive an electoral college vote, you would have to have been nominated and received votes when electoral colleges meet around the country. So we all know, and I think we know a little bit more about this process around the states, we don't actually vote for president, right? You vote for electors who gather at state capitals after the election and then cast a ballot for the particular party. But there's a concept called a faithless elector, which is someone who actually votes against the party that they were supposed to and nominated from. And in 1972, there was a faithless elector in Virginia who actually was a Republican elector, but chose to vote against Nixon and Agnew and actually voted for the Libertarian Party, which actually received about 4,000 votes nationally. But that allowed Toni Nathan to actually be the first woman to receive votes in electoral college as vice president in 1972. So little history facts. You can win 4,000 votes, but actually get an electoral college vote if someone decides they're not going to do what they're supposed to do. Who was the first woman to have her name placed in nomination for president at a major political party convention? It's not Shirley Chisholm. That's what I thought it was. It's not Shirley Chisholm. This is before she was the first African-American woman, yes. Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman to have her name placed in nomination for president. But there was a woman before her. So clearly it's not an African-American woman if Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman. It was Margaret Chase Smith, United States Senator, 1964. Now, let's go to the United States Senate female history. Who was the first woman elected to the Senate in a regular election? So not getting to the Senate by appointment, not elected in a special election, in a regular November 6-year term election. Who was the first woman elected to the US Senate? Margaret Chase Smith. In 1948, she was elected from the state of Maine. She served 3 terms in the US Senate and also served in the Congress before that. Who is the longest serving woman in the history of the US Senate? Murkowski. But yep, Barbara Murkowski from Maryland served 30 years in the US Senate. Now, interestingly, fingers crossed and knock on wood if you're superstitious, that could change by the end of this year. The senior senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, was actually elected in a special election. So she has served 29 years, 4 months. And so if she serves the remaining of this term, she'll actually pass Senator Murkowski by a couple of months. That's probably, the record won't last long, probably, because Senator Patty Murray also has been serving the Senate for 29 years, 2 months. But Senator Feinstein turns 90 next year, and Senator Murray is in her early 70s. So I think the good senator from Washington State might eventually claim that record. Now let's go abroad. Who was the first female head of government, elected head of government in a democracy? So not talking a monarch, not talking Queen Elizabeth I, right? The first woman in a democracy elected to be head of government. Not Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi is actually the second. Golda Meir was third. So Indira Gandhi was Prime Minister of India from 66 through 77 and from 80 until her assassination in 84. And Golda Meir was Prime Minister of Israel from 69 through 74. The person who was first, and I don't think even Michael J. Thorpe might not have gotten this, Thirimavo Bandaranaike of Sri Lanka, which then was called Ceylon. She was first became Prime Minister of Sri Lanka in 1960. Connie Peters was right on the tip of her tongue, right? She actually served 18 years as Prime Minister between 1960 and the year 2000. Coincidentally, I thought someone might say Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister. She's number 6. She was the 6th woman to be head of government, Prime Minister of Great Britain from 79 to 90. Can anyone name who was the other woman to serve as Prime Minister of Great Britain? It was recently, like 3 years ago. Theresa May. Theresa May. Now, interesting quote from a British politician that's just a quote about how history changes. So the politician said that they did not believe in their lifetime that a woman would become Prime Minister of Great Britain. And they were wrong. A woman did become Prime Minister during her lifetime, Margaret Thatcher. Can anyone guess what British politician made that public pronouncement? Churchill's the guest. Anyone on the Zoom? I see Jerry mouthing Churchill. The British politician is actually Margaret Thatcher herself. The reason is, and when she said that, she was a junior minister, and no woman had ever been appointed to any of the top 4 jobs in government. Margaret Thatcher's actual goal was to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is equivalent to kind of in our government would be like being Vice President / Secretary of the Treasury. It's the number 2 post. So her goal was to be number 2 because no one had broken the glass ceilings above her before then. So that's why we celebrate women's history. That's why it's important to acknowledge these things, not to celebrate those who have done them, but to inspire those who come behind. So little political trivia and history for you. I now have the pleasure to do something for my first time as Rotary president. Flint Rotarians and guests. Jack Hamady personified Rotary's motto. You heard a little bit from David Smith about Mr. Rotary, Jack Hamady. Service above self, that motto. In every transaction with others, he always exemplified Rotary's philosophy of truth, fairness, goodwill, and mutual benefit. His commitment to always build strong relationships with others led to him being known as Mr. Rotary. Jack loved Flint and the thought of himself as a community servant. Throughout his lifetime, his name frequently appeared as a board member of Flint area civic organizations, and in many cases, he served as president or chair of the group. In Rotary, he served as our club president in 1967 and as district governor in 72 through 73. From the time he first joined Rotary, he maintained an amazing record of perfect attendance, 40.5 years. In honor of Jack's love and commitment to Rotary, our club created the Flint Rotary Endowment Fund in 1994. Its purpose is to perpetuate and enhance Flint Rotary's community and international service projects. Every contributor to the endowment fund of $1,000 is recognized as a Jack Hamady Fellow. These contributions can be in the form of a single gift or contributions over time totaling that amount. Today, we are honoring a new Jack Hamady Fellow. I'm looking to make sure they didn't leave. Let me remind you the correct protocol in recognizing our newest Jack Hamady Fellows. Just as with Paul Harris Fellow introductions, when a recipient is first announced, please stand and offer applause. I am honored to introduce our newest Jack Hamady Fellow, Terrence E. Mormon. Terry, would you please join me up front? Since Spirit Jack Hamady, Terry as well is one of those quiet, humble individuals who literally, I think today, agreed to let us present this to him in person, maybe. When you work with someone like Amy Vanderput, you're always going to be in your toes. So Terry, I'm proud to present you with a certificate and recognize you as the newest Jack Hamady Fellow. Thank you. And Rick, we'll get a picture of what's happening. You may be seated. Thank you.
We normally stand up and honor them.
Under announcements, I do have, well, actually not under announcements, under health and welfare, I should say, 2 announcements. One, if you noticed our 50-50, Fred Hines is not doing quite as well as in the hospital. We've seen on Facebook, but is getting treatment and seems to hopefully be doing better back with us soon. And also, we have sad news to pass along. Rotarian Bill Moeller passed away yesterday. Bill was a just consummate philanthropist, leader, mentor, and servant in our community. Certainly, he and his family are in our thoughts and prayers. As we get the details, we'll get that out to everyone. But I don't believe that we have that information quite yet. We do, I believe, have guests to be welcomed. And I'll start on Zoom first, if there's any guests to be welcomed.
We had a brief pop in from Carol. I don't know if she's still there.
Yep, we did have a brief visit from Carol Herand. And in the room, I believe we have a couple of guests as well. And just I'll ask the Rotarians who are there to introduce their guests, and we'll start with David Smith. Yeah, and in the room, we have Ken Boback from staff, who is got some big shoes to fill of David Smith's there at the company. And then we see, Gary, I do see Carol, if she wants to want to unmute and have Carol say hi, we see her in the room.
Hello, membership. Glad to see you all.
Hi, Carol, thank you. And Connie Peters.
Yeah. Ladies first. David, she is my husband is the guest speaker today. So I sent a text message. He said, "Is your wife joining?"
So we have in the room Marcy Davidson, who is the neighbor of Connie Peters, 2 doors down, and the spouse of one of our guest speakers. So then you give her a round of applause. And you also have
And Dave Perry, but he knows, and he's here for his second meeting.
Yes, we have Dave Perry joining us again from 360 Interactive and has just submitted an application. So Bob Salisky will be scheduling an orientation with you hopefully the next month or so. We'll work on that. Absolutely. Thank you. And now we have Rob Bennett. And I'm going to ask Mr. Perry as upstanding person along with Joy at the table, but I'm going to ask as Dave as our guest to join to draw the winning tickets.
It was almost legit today in this Cherry Hill. I'm sure your numbers are in here somewhere, Cherry. All right. 62521. Jane. All right. Second place. 62936. 936. That's George. Maybe we can have a winning table back. 62546. Joy, all right. It was a clean election. Whatever, drawing, ref, whatever it is. No, we're good. Thanks for playing.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Dave. Yeah. Dan Craney was saying that he was down at Monroe Community College and saw past President Gerald McCarty, who works there. And Gerald sends his regards and hopes to see us sometime during the summer. So that's great. I see Gerald on LinkedIn occasionally and still has that big smile. So it's great to see that. Well, now I have the privilege of introducing another past president, Amy Krug, to introduce our speaker. Amy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I had a few moments of apprehension when I was trying to think of David's introduction and reaching back for a book on my shelf, and the most advanced possible thing I could have hoped to pull off my shelf would have been like Shel Silverstein. And that would have been like high end. So I really need to step up my book collection. That's probably, I'm hoping as the girls get older, maybe we can advance that a little bit, let's just say. So, yeah, thanks. So it is my true pleasure today to introduce two gentlemen that are going to be speaking with us. We have the first I'll introduce Walt, and then I'll pass off to Father Don. So Walter Peak, better known as Walt, is a lifelong Flintstone, born, raised, educated, employed, and happily retired, all in Flint. Flint graduate of Flint Northern. Go Vikings, yes? Awesome. Mott Community College and the University of Michigan Flint. Walt had an illustrious career in children's mental health or mental health services and worked for CMH for many years. He also, prior to retiring from CMH, worked for the CARF International, which is their accreditation process. And he traveled to all 50 states, visiting mental health and substance treatment facilities. So that's quite an accomplishment there. Oh, as well as Canada and Japan. So that is really remarkable. He and his wife, who is my dear friend Edie, who I adore and worked with at Priority Children, are both members of the St. Paul's Parish, and he currently serves as a member of the vestry. He's also the parish archivist and chair of the church's stewardship committee. So he is a very avid traveler and trekker. And when I say that, I mean, like, you walk hundreds and hundreds of miles, like across countries, which is bizarre to me. But yay, you. He has been part of bringing me on board to help with part of the re-envisioning that St. Paul's is doing for their amazing parish in downtown Flint that is celebrating its 150th year as an institution downtown. So we're going to have a chance to hear from Walt. But first, I was told that Father Don would be kicking off the presentation. Father Don Davidson is the priest in charge. That's an awesome title, by the way, of St. Paul's. He is a graduate of Rio Grande, not Rio Grande, Rio Grande, I was told, in that southeast part of that state down below us that we don't talk about. It starts with O and ends with O. He has 2 degrees from the Seabury Western Theological Seminary in Chicago. And he is also a retired chaplain colonel in the Army, so don't get out of hand. So it's my pleasure right now to pass off to Father Doug.
Hi. Do we have any Presbyterians here? It's too bad. I always like to be around people who have a church that's almost as hard to spell as Episcopalian. So it isn't really, but it's really close. Yeah, well, I'm one of those weirdo things called an Episcopalian. We are not known for a whole lot, but what we are known for is that whenever you have 4 Episcopalians in the same place, you'll always find a 5th. But just, you know, you can take that, you know, it wasn't, but you can take it that way. But right now it's Lent. We're not sure to whom, but we're trying to keep it, you know, the best way we can. I am an interim rector. One time years ago, when I was pretty young in this job, I was introduced by an elder lady at Church Women United as being the rectum of the church. So I always say rector is better. Rector simply means senior priest of a parish. And so I am the rector, but they call me a priest in charge because I have an expiration date. I am an interim, kind of like something you put in your refrigerator that after a while becomes a science experiment. That's kind of what happens to interim priests if they stay too long. So I'm here for about a year to 18 months. And then after that period of time, I probably am going to go home, move back into home with my wife, and try to stay out of Connie's way down the street. But this opportunity of serving St. Paul's has got this amazing history. You know, it began 180 years ago, and it's been in a couple of places. The major church before the church where you all know, right downtown at 3rd and Saginaw, was where Blackstone's is. That's where we were before we moved up the street. That was 150 years ago. 150 years ago this year that building was built, and then it was added on to, and then it was changed, and then it was added on to, and you know, churches do that. They're a bit like a thyroid condition. And after a while, you know, this church has become not just a part of the community, because that sounds like it's still an add-on. The church, like these downtown churches, like Court Street Methodist and I can't even think of the name of the Roman Catholic Church that's around the corner. I bet some of you know that one. Thank you. And see, I knew there was always a Catholic. And then First Presbyterian across the street. These churches have been there a long, long time. They're kind of cornerstones of the community, if you will. Now, there might be bigger churches, there might even be older churches, but those churches are mainstays. They've been around a long time. And so the Episcopalians, unlike they did in the West, where they didn't show up until after Pullman cars got there, Episcopalians in this part of the United States were actually original. You know, we came before the state of Michigan, before the state of to the south. I've learned before this any of the other states around, and that has kind of been a part of our history too. So we have decided through the years, all churches are different, folks. Churches are different this day than they've ever been before. In 1970, and this is a terrible statistic and it makes me very sad, but in 1970, 70% of people who called or identified themselves as Christian attended church at least twice a month. 70%. Today, that's teetering around 40%. Now, that's huge. The population has changed. Of course it has. We have more adults, we have more elder adults, and we have lesser kids. Flint has gone through a massive change, you know that. And the churches that once were huge are tiny. So how can we support, as a congregation, a big hulk of a building that's got more rooms in it than most any mansion? How can we keep the lights on and the heat on and make it something that the community can use, not just us? I mean, face it, we don't have the luxury to make a building that size into something that only a few people use. So what can we do? So we managed to get with a group called Partners for Sacred Places that works at preserving historic buildings, but also works to try to figure out what does this community need and what can we share? I'm going to come back after Walt takes you on a little trip, and hopefully you'll still be awake. And after that, I want to connect the dots a little bit. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I told Amy before I got started that usually when I stand in front of a microphone, I kind of freeze. I choke up, and this is not what I've done for a living. So please forgive me. Look at this. It works. Again, my name is Walter Peak, and member at St. Paul's, been on the vestry for a couple of times. This is my second trip through. Wanted to start just with kind of an overview of a couple of photographs and a couple of ideas that we kind of hang on to it at St. Paul's. The notion of the church is a place we're working hard all the time to open our doors, to welcome our neighbors, share our gifts, and build a parish. And if you look across those photographs, there are a couple that are kind of, whoa, hello. Did I do that? Okay, that's fine. So if you look across those photographs, Father Don mentioned the first building that we worshiped in, or that the congregation worshiped in 1842. That's the bell from that building. It wasn't exactly Blackstone's, it was just a tiny bit north of Blackstone's. That bell weighed 500 pounds, 29 inches, and they moved it from that old church to St. Paul's in 1872. And it wasn't just for us. That was run for the Presbyterians. At that time, they said the Presbyterian Society as well. They didn't have a bell, so they used ours at the time. Second picture is exactly what it looks like. Welcoming our neighbors, a full congregation, but late 1950s, early 1960s. The next photograph is one that I want to spend a little bit of time on. That window was installed in 1916. It was installed by some grieving parents in memory of their child, Donald M. Whaley. And it was installed in the church a few years before R.J. Whaley passed away. My first job in my social work career was at the Whaley Center. And at that time, when I hired in there, it was the vestry of St. Paul's that served as the board of trustees. And indeed, when R.J. Whaley died in 1922, his will specified that the vestry at St. Paul's would serve as on the board of trustees. The first president of the board of trustees was a man named Charles Stewart Mott, and he was a faithful parishioner at St. Paul's. And Charles Stewart Mott was responsible largely for the first major expansion of our building, that building that sits kind of in the middle next to the church. So he was responsible for that piece. The vice president of the trust at the time was a guy named Charles Barth, vice president of General Motors, vice president of Chevrolet, and another faithful St. Paul's congregant. And the comments earlier about not having any idea what's going to, what the ultimate result of your actions today. These folks in years past, their contributions, their initiative, their work, their service on the vestry have resulted in that building standing there and remaining and being sustained today. We have a Charles Barth, our big dining hall at St. Paul's, his name, Barth Hall. That's where we have all of the public meetings. Just a little bit of history about the parish itself, a couple of red letter days. I was founded by a missionary priest from Green Bay, Wisconsin. He came in 1839 in August. He found a community eager to establish an Episcopal church. He went back to Green Bay, got his wife and his two kids, brought them back to Flint in November 16th of 1839. They remained, and he was called his first rector in January of 1840. And the church was destitute at the time, had no money, had no ability to build a building, and the bishop dispatched him back to New York State, where most of our parishioners came from at the time. And he was on a fundraising campaign, came back to Flint with $1,700, and they decided they were going to build a church. So they built a temporary shelter that they lovingly called the Tabernacle. And that was down by the corner of Union and Harrison Street. They worshiped there from 1840 to 1843, when they finally got enough money to start the construction on the first real church building. But when Reverend Brown came to Flint, and he found this enthusiastic congregation, he took copious notes of all of this stuff. And we have the list of the 55 families that he named. Among them were folks like, you'll know them all: Averill, Bishop, Cummings, Dewey, Decker, Hamilton, Henderson, Pearson, all of these names that you see on the street signs today. These were the folks that founded St. Paul's. This year, the cornerstone for our building was erected, or was dedicated on May 29th of 1872. It's cleverly dated. I should go back to the other one. The cornerstone is actually dated May 20th of 1872, misdated. So the very first action that they took in constructing that building is a typo. So this year, beginning in May, we'll kick off a season of celebration running for 15 months. It took them 15 months to build the place. The first service was in August of 1873. So in that 15-month period, we're going to kind of recreate that at the church. And so for the next several months, we'll be sponsoring lots and lots of community events. We got a fantastic one coming up this May, where we're going to kind of relive the cornerstone laying celebration. We've got the bishop coming in. We'll have a day of events that Saturday before. In October, we have a wonderful event, a collaboration with Glenwood Cemetery. And we're actually going to have our All Saints Day and All Saints Day service over there collaboratively with the other churches at Glenwood. Let me see. I'll get the slide. The slide's up. There we go. For what's new, what's next, imagining our future together. Father Don talked about our work with Partners for Sacred Places. It's a preservation organization that started, and its mission is to help churches like St. Paul's to preserve our building, but make sure that we're being the best stewards that we can. And Father Don began touching on this process that we're calling our community asset mapping process, and we've got the folks from Partners coming in early in June to help us with that. We view that building, we know we're the stewards of it, we know we're the caretakers of it, but it doesn't really belong to us, right? It's going to be here 100 years after we're all gone. It belongs to the community in many ways. And so we're trying to figure out ways to make sure that we're taking the best care of it that we can, and putting it to the best use that we can for the benefit of the community. Our hope is to engage in shared work that helps us to build new connections and new relationships with our friends and neighbors, the community at large. And that will largely be the work of the group that Amy is helping us with. I won't read you the kind of the Partners mission statement. They've been around for a long time. They have close ties with churches all over the country. And in Michigan, they've done work with lots and lots of historically important congregations and help them preserve their historical buildings. Yeah, Father, do you want to take the rest on the partners piece and talk a little bit about the asset mapping coming up, or you want me to do that? I didn't fall over. I did well.
I don't know where you do the slides. I know, I'm better at talking. Gee, what a surprise, a priest that talks. Anyway, the asset mapping, have you all heard of what asset mapping is? It's one of those things that comes around and kind of grabs you a little bit. But the idea of asset mapping is using what you got. I mean, really, that's what it's all about. Finding out what's present, finding out what gifts. Now I'm going to throw in a spiritual thing because that's what I do, but finding out what gifts God has given us and using them to the best extent we can. And that's basically what asset mapping is. It's the discovery and the determination of what gifts are there. Why do we need that? Well, for one thing, we don't want to become the Department of Redundancy department. It just doesn't help. So if you can look at what you are doing as a church and you find out that the Presbyterians and those pesky Methodists are doing the same thing a block away, well, what in the world are you doing it for? Let's recognize that, well, sadly, we may not. Churches need to realize that we're all on the same side and we may not need every kiosk that we have now. We're all working for the same thing, and hopefully we're all working in the same employment, same boss. So let's divide up what we can do best and do it even better. And that's a lot to do with what this is about. So I don't know what the next one is, but go ahead and get the next one. I think there was a story about a parish in, I believe, Pennsylvania, and I think Philadelphia. It's a 300-year-old parish, and it was having trouble keeping its doors open. And they went into a program very similar to what we're looking at. And they decided to become, and this is a term that they used, called a Center for Spirituality. Now, they were still going to do their service. They were still going to be Episcopalian. So they're still going to have, Episcopal aerobics on Sunday, stand up, sit down, kneel, stand up, sit down, the whole thing. They're still going to do liturgy that is so old in some respects that there's hardly anybody alive who can tell you what it was supposed to mean way back when it did mean something. Sadly, that's a little bit of the reality. In addition to being that traditional place that it's always been, it's going to be something different, which is not about evangelization. It's not about proselytization. We're not trying to make Presbyterians into Episcopalians. We have enough trouble making Catholics into Episcopalians. I mean, it's the truth, folks, that's not what at least we're about. I love that old saying that says the Baptist asks someone to church once every 2 weeks, an Episcopalian asks somebody to church once every 22 years. Something truth about that, but this is not that. It's not about proselytization. It's not about evangelization. It's about what can we do for people. And how can we share that love, that grace, that energy with the population? And Flint needs that. So let's look at the assets and look at the neighborhood and look at the things that this community needs, and let's get to work. Because together we can make it happen. That's what a spiritual center is all about. Nothing to do with the denomination. So it shouldn't be, and I hope it isn't, a threat to anybody, because that's not what we're about. Okay. With that, whatever next. We hope that when this project, when we get further into it, again, our thanks to Amy for being a part of that, is a combination of our people and people in the community together working on the whole idea of what we need. So think about what would happen if, I mean, this is where I get dreamy, like a 16-year-old. I honestly think about what would happen if we got the energy and the commitment from other churches around that same neighborhood and say, you know, we got to find some place for people to get warm when it's cold. We got to find some place where people can find a new set of clothes, especially maybe a new set of clothes where they can go to an interview. There's lots of jobs. We've got to do something for people who are hungry. We've got to be a place where people can get medical care. We even have to have a walk-in clinic with a bunch of veterinarians, because there's an awful lot of homeless people who still have their animals and they need to be taken care of. What can we do? How can we share? So that's the forward-looking progressive Episcopalians. And I am proud of this. It's a little church nowadays. It's not what it was 150 years ago. But I believe in it, and I'm optimistic, about this incredible community. Thank you.
You guys had a relay race. I wasn't sure if Walt was coming back for the anchor leg there. On your table, I will say for the returns in the room, there is some information that the church has left. I think there's a walking tour. So if you're there and you want to see more about what Walt and Father Don talked about, I think that information is on the table as well. We're not going to find a visitor, so I was looking to see whose phone it was, but you're not good. Do we have questions for either Walt or Father? Yes.
On Sunday morning, wonderful.
So, yeah, I'm going to repeat it. Yeah, I'm going to repeat it because folks assume like, what's Jane saying? So what Jane Odell was saying is that in her youth, there was a time where actually there was a fire and a firefighter was happened to be around, I guess, at least Sunday morning, and wanted to go into the church and was denied entrance because he was not dressed appropriately to come to church. And Father reacted how you thought he reacted to that happening years ago. And Jane was also saying that the church has made some changes to the exterior of the church so that a visitor walking by can see into the church and it's more welcoming to those in the community that may be passing by. I will note also that I've known, at least pre-COVID, St. Paul's was an art walk stop. And so, you know, on those, it still is, okay, on those second Fridays as an opportunity for those in the community to see art and maybe pass a beautiful stained glass window that may give them other inspiration along with the art as well. A question in the room? Yes. Sure.
Gary Rand.
So my friend James Franklin will appreciate this because Jerry Hill is going to get a good Baptist to say that the Episcopal Church's music is great, and that's what Jerry's comment was. So are there other questions? Yeah, Dan. So Dan Craney's comment, I think I will ask actually either Walter or Father to come up and just expound on, but was about churches needing to communicate differently to a different generation and needing to engage the community with different communication tools to help reach their message. Maybe if you want to talk about how St. Paul's is doing that or how you're thinking about doing that, that'd be great.
How many of your churches, just because I'm nosy, how many of your churches, if you attend, had live streaming before March of 2020? Uh-huh. Okay, there's one. That, yeah, most do now, right? How many do? You got to find something good to come out of this pandemic. Maybe that's it. I mean, it is. We just met. Walt and I were just meeting with folks that are putting in a new system at St. Paul's. Our live streaming was a cell phone and a prayer, and it wasn't really that great, but at least we were attempting it. Yeah, I think churches need to be on Facebook. I think churches need to be on Instagram and all that. I'm a geek. My wife says I'm a dork too, but that's a different thing. And being that I've always had a high regard for electronic communication of one kind or another, it has really hit me how important it is. However, I also want to say something important. Our younger people find church to be one place where they can actually sit down and talk to one another and not be overheard or judged. So church is a very important place for our youth, except most of our youth don't know that. So we're going to work on it, but it's a toughie because almost, oh gosh, so many churches don't have it. That's just sad. Oh.
To that point, I was a young person at church years ago and still a young person at church. Amy, yes.
Very open.
Amy said that the asset mapping is very open and inclusive.
Is it?
If you're interested in being part of the asset mapping process, let either Walt or Father or certainly Amy Krug know as well. Let Walt know. Let Walt know. Father, it's clarified now. Well, certainly on behalf of the Rotary Club of Flint, we'd like to thank both you, Father, and Walt for coming in and being our guest speakers today. A contribution in your names will be made to the Rotary International Foundation to support the eradication of polio. Let's give them a round of applause. I want to thank for their service today, David Smith for a great inspirational message. I want to thank Amy Krug for doing a great job with our speaker introduction. Rick Hetherington pulling double duty, bulletin notes, and beat me here with the setup and takedown. So you were on the ball. And Elizabeth Jordan, as always, as our Zoom host. Please join us next Friday for a presentation by Kay Schwartz, a Rotarian as well. Director of Library Services of the Flint Public Library. Flint Public Library Transformed. And Elizabeth, did you get my email with the signed? Okay, I was gonna say we have signed documentation for our naming the club through one of our foundation grants supported their project as well. So we'll get to not only hear about a great project, but hear how your Rotary contributions are going to work right here in the Flint. So please remember, as you go about your day to serve to change lives, go blue. And the meeting is adjourned.